You're gonna like me for this, but it's okay. All of the rest of those are practices in procrastination. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to get it. Well, I don't have it. Well, that's expensive. Well, how would I put? None of that's relevant if there is no book. If you don't have the aspiration to have you a good little, 50 cent from the dollar store composition notebook, or get up in the morning and have a Word doc sitting on your desktop that at some point taunts you to open it and write during the day, you don't want to write. Oops, I said that, so there. Because writing is a fully exhausting and existing art in itself. And to write is the process of the writer, right? And for me, there have been times, so first book, Unclutter, was written after, so I don't know, this is a quick, so after, in 2001, I was made pastor in January of 2001. August, I was with Aaliyah and the crew for her Rock the Boat shoot and was supposed to be on the plane with them, but got on an earlier flight to preach in Baltimore. And 18 days later, after burying her and doing all of this media, the next time I got on the plane was Tuesday, September 11th. And then after that, it felt like this need to write haunted me. And people, I said to my best friend, it felt like God was stalking me. He's like, you can't be a preacher and tell people that God is stalking you. I was like, I can tell you about a relentless voice that wakes you up in the middle of the night. I can tell you what it's like to have anybody old enough to remember what was it that daggone phone called the slit like that, and it had to keep the kick.
The sidekick.
The sidekick. Me and that sidekick, y'all think y'all can I was writing whole chapters like this on the train because it's like it would not stop speaking. And so I want you to begin the process of supporting the writer. 1, write. 2, support the writer, right? And so if that means you leave notes someplace for yourself, if that means when you've got some time off or on the Saturday because it's your one free day, you're trying to get the process done, then assign it to your calendar. Assign a 9 to 2, a 9 to 12, some sort of process in the day to sit with the apparatus that you are using and your thoughts. Because here's the thing, so many people, when they get stuck in the process of writing, get stuck in the process of writer's block, and the process in the way they've designed it already blocks the writer, right? It's like you want 12 chapters in your mind before you sit down to write. That's for me, has not been how writing has proven productive. The idea of sitting down with the character, sitting down with the outline, sitting down with 6 index cards and just putting them down on paper. See, that's the thing. If you would just write what you think the title's gonna be, they ain't gotta say that. Write what you think the thing is gonna be about, and just throw out random notes. Then, I mean, if any of you have had the blessing to be called to preach, many of time that's how the sermon comes. You'll start with one word, and then you get a word, and that word you find a scripture, that word in the scripture, and then a song with some of the words in it, and then you find quotes with that. And next thing you're looking at this cacophony of words on a page that you got to do a Soul Train scramble board on. It's like, here's the topic, here's the sermon. I want to bring this in first. Ooh, that feels like a good way to end. So I'm knowing I'm gonna put that down there. It's this. So imagine it as that same process. Imagine it as process. And the reason we get stuck in kind of sitting down with the blank book or sitting down with the blank page is because we've already counted it blank. It is not. There are children in your head who want to give us free. And you've got to be willing to just put random words, throw them on the page, just throw them. Because just like your prayers, hello game changers, just like your prayers, everything sounds different in your head. Hello, somebody? You swore you asked God for what you needed in your head. You swore you let it go in your head. You swore you worked it out in your head. And then she show up and you can't say nothing. If the problem shows up and you're, because it's in your head. By myself, I pray out loud so I can hear what I'm asking for. Because sometimes I've got to auto-correct. Hello? Hello? No? Good morning? Anybody? And sometimes you got to auto-correct yourself. Damn, is that, no, thank God. Well, thank you, Lord, for not giving me that, if that's what I've been saying all this time. And so the writing process is very much like that, all right? It's the idea, it's you know, well, no, we preach folk, we church folk. It is literally the scripture, write the vision, period, make it plain. The plain part, like the real clear, you know, I'm a left-handed Virgo and nothing works for me as clear as an outline. It's like, I do it in my sermons, I do it in papers, I do it in the book. Like, what do I think I have? And then as you move stuff around, as you process stuff, as you sit with stuff, sometimes it's one word that can give birth to the whole introduction chapter because you got that word, you heard that word, but you have to work with that word sometimes. Sometimes you have to go to faith and it's 12 definitions before you go, oh, it's number 5. I've been so stuck on what the number 1 was because I used it in a sermon last year that I didn't realize that the reason it came back to me was because definition number 5 is kicking my butt. So let's pull that out. Let's extract that. Let's look at all the exegesis of that and pull it into the conversation. And then it becomes a whole thing. And I'm telling y'all, Sean will tell you, well, yeah, we all remember Kevin. Y'all call me Kevin, I'm girl. Sean, I remember the day. I love biblical epiphanies because, you know, if you've been in church for any amount of time, you've heard now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And if you're not paying attention, that sounds like there's there's punctuation inferred in there. Now faith is so when I had to go to that word and it said now faith, there was no punctuation. I'm telling you, it blew my entire mind because without any punctuation, faith has an adjective. Hello? And so it became this whole nother, wait a minute, there are kinds of faith. Wait a minute, there's purpose, you know, and it just did the work to make. And so that I remember preaching Relentless that particular Sunday because the way it talked about all these people in this faith was just a gut check that I could add myself into. Like, I got this kind of faith. I've had this kind of moment. And so the idea that writing is a process needs a process. So somebody say that with me. The writing is a process that needs a process. It doesn't just happen. You're not just gonna, you know, there is nobody that can tell you the story of I picked up the pen and when I stopped, the whole book was there. It's the whole idea that anytime a thought comes to you, anytime a sentence, a phrase, anything that feels like it is grabbing hold of something, have something, even if it's your phone, to speak into. Have a little voice recorder phone so that, you know, you know, you might feel like that crazy dude on Suits who was always walking around with his dictaphone. But at the end of the day, you've got the notes somewhere because there is nothing that will kill the process worse than a solid statement that came to you 2 days ago. Now that you're ready to write, you can't find it. Nowhere in there. Because since there's been a job, your wife, your husband, you know, rent, you know, chicken was on your mind. And next thing you know, that glorious, perfect sentence is gone. And so it was the whole enthusiasm that it brought up at the time. So that's step one, that, you know, right. And there's a process to the process. You gotta get with that, right? Can we be okay with that? So why write? You know, that's, you know, at the end of the day, why write is always the first question I start with. You know, why write, period? And then why you write, right? Because I'm telling you, and I pulled these out really as examples. When I was called to write, let me tell you the story. When I first got called to write Unclutter, it happened after, was it 96 or 7, Sean? I was at BET. Things started to get really weird then. It was time to go. And I heard that voice to leave my fun, amazing, wild job. But, you know, a lesbian sister friend of mine, who's also my executive producer, said, you've got to sit with the truth, and that is that you've outgrown this place. And I was like, how do you outgrow BET? How do you outgrow network television? How do you outgrow sitting at your desk and, you know, Maxwell calls and Patti LaBelle walks out? How do you outgrow that? But lo and behold, when I prayed on it, God was like, yeah, it's time to go. And so the time to go process happened. And then it was like, how did that happen? I'll quit. And then I'll get, you know, my next check. Or, you know, they were doing this layoff, and the layoff then became, wait, you get paid for every year you pay. And so it became layoff. And then right after that, Bev Smith, who was the host of a show at the time called Our Voices, called me over to her office and said, we're going to the Holy Land and I want you to come with me. I heard you were one of the ones they laid off. And I was like, what? So we go to the Holy Land, end up having this thing that I write about in Unclutter, where I'm floating in the Dead Sea, crying out to the Lord. And the sun comes and says, yeah, write about this. And I was like, okay. So just tell them I'm always with you, God said. Tell them I am always with you. And then I go back home to no job. Hello. Then I go back home to what do I do? Then I go back to, you know, not at BET, trying to act like I'm okay when my heart is broken, trying to, walk in some new vision while I'm in DC. And I was like, what do you do from here? I had no plan after here. I had no vision after here. Then I almost lose my house, right? And so nobody, everybody you've done for, you're like, hey, I'm short on my mortgage. And everybody, you should have called 2 weeks ago. You can call me next week. And so it was just this spiral. And then God did something miraculous and cleansed that out. And then, I started to let people into my life and my heart and cleanse that out. And then BET calls, so this is about a year cycle. They're like, my boss says, the vice president says, come in and help me work on special projects. And then when we were in the meeting, and I want every one of us in our queerness and our thickness and our blackness and our otherness and our too muchness to hear this, because she sat me down and she said, so Kevin, we're working on some new projects and I need some, the network is really trying to make some big changes. You probably, and she said this to me, you're probably one of the most creative people who's ever worked here. And I want you back, but I don't want your mouth. And I was like, can you tell what I said with my eyes? Can you tell what I said? Can you tell what word I wrote down? So I was like, I said, I'm sorry. You didn't seem to have minded my mouth when I defended you in a board meeting. You didn't seem to have minded my mouth when I came up with the idea that gave the network. So what is this mouth thing about? And accept that people have problems when all of me shows up. So if you're asking me to come back, I want you to be very clear in advance that all of me is coming, right? Somebody just say, all of me is coming.
All of me
is coming. You're going to write the book.
All of me is coming.
All of me is coming.
Open it up, open your mic and say, all of me is coming so you can hear it. You've got to hear that. All of me.
All of me is coming.
All of me is coming.
Pain, your past, your secrets, you got to give all of you permission to be involved. Because I promise you, if you try to write a book and tell your story right here from the effluvium of your anointing and from the process from when you were ordained to now, and you think you're going to leave that little girl back there who was molested, who was heartbroken, who was talked about, that little boy who was bullied, if you think you're going to be able to get this truth out and leave them back there, you're in for the rudest awakening ever. So you've got to give yourself permission to decompartmentalize when you're writing, because otherwise there's no need to write. Why I write is because I'm prepared to tell the truth, right? And I don't know if any of you, because behind me I've got stacks and stacks of books, and I don't know if any of you are like autobiography readers, but at one point, Patty's autobiography was out, Gladys Knight, Shaka Khan, Diana Ross, Aretha Franklin, and all these, Luther Vandross, Marvin Gaye. It's a whole bunch of autobiographies out there, and I'm always intrigued by people's stories. Diane Carroll, I remember reading several of them when you could tell people just got book deals and somebody else wrote it. Hello, somebody. Because it was biographical, right? It was that. And born in it. It wasn't I, Tina. Hello? Because I, Tina was like, yeah, he hit me in the plate with cake and you know what I mean? There was no, and then that night at the Grammys, it was so wonderful. And so Natalie Cole did the same thing with her book, Angel on My Shoulder. It starts with Nat King Cole's daughter dies from overdose. And she was talking about the time that she had taken heroin and felt herself slipping under the sink in this tenement in Chicago. And she was like, that's where the story could have ended. And she has these moments where she tells the whole truth, and that book went on to become a New York Times and LA bestseller. It ended up becoming a movie. It ended up because it had so much truth in it. Truth is universal, everybody. You think your story is about a gay man, you think your story is about a lesbian, but truth is universal. So you must tell the truth, because truth goes to that same hiding place in everybody. Like, oh man, you telling that? Because it tells them, because the little boy will rear their head when they go, wait, see, you ain't by yourself. Somebody else went through that. So the truth will give you permission to write. And you got to get okay with that, because I don't care if you're rhyming, I don't care if you're doing a memoir, I don't care if you're trying to write on prose or poetry. Truth is always in it. And so you got to be connected to what your truth is, and this is good, and be connected to your truth triggers.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Right? Because your truth triggers are the things that come up in you that remind you of why you're doing it and give you permission to do it. So if you got music that needs to play while you're writing. If you got if you got an aunt or uncle that you call and can tell truth to and share stories with, and what was that, and remember that time, and remember that time you got friends, because all of those truth triggers will be the thing that unleash. Because most times when people get blocked, get writers blocked, they don't get writers blocked, they get writers stuck. And it really is, am I going to tell this part? Am I going to say this part? You know, especially from a people, hello black people, hello black queer people, especially from a people who have got a lot of friends in our personal lives who do and don't do stuff because it is and ain't somebody's business. I don't know, maybe nobody on here has a couple of friends who are a couple, who still have a bedroom that one of them moves into when one of them mama comes to visit. Because I have friends in DC who have a home that has a room in it that the other goes to come out of when their mother comes to visit. I'm like, I don't understand that. You're men in your 40s who live in the same house. How could you think there's any secret? You both make enough money to have separate houses. What are you telling them that, you know, it's budget saving? You got on $400 shoes. You're driving a $100,000 car. What you were trying to save money? It wouldn't be in the house, would it? But you know what I'm saying? So it's these things that we have to sit with so that we're mindful of our truth triggers, right? And we have to be mindful, here it comes, of our truth traps. Sometimes we start trying to tell a story a certain way. Somebody say a certain way. Anybody just
certain way.
A certain way for acceptance, a certain way, because mommy will be alive to read it, a certain way, because I don't know if I could stand in front of people and read this particular story out loud. Then don't write it.
Then don't write it.
Because the why write is a question that is yours to answer. It is your personal truth. And if you ever want to stop, if you ever want to ensure that a room doesn't move when you speak, call on your truth traps instead of your truth triggers. Because your truth triggers will destroy a building. Your truth triggers will make people fall out and need 3 and 4 ushers, and maybe even you. Your truth triggers, because it's that thing that goes, oh. And I'm telling you, all of this doesn't just happen before a sermon. It'll happen before a poetry reading. It'll happen before a book reading. It'll happen because you're like, oh my God. I mean, my Philadelphia family knows I brought almost all of my books. Listen. Look, I don't know if they know this, Reverend-elect X. Listen. This story right here, Jaded, my first novel, tells the story of the me who was heartbroken and betrayed and decided after that to bury myself in work because I didn't need love, and then met somebody, right? That's the story. That's the story, and I'm sticking with it, right? When I came to Philadelphia, the somebody I wrote about, literally 6'3", dreadlocks to his back, walked into the signing, and the whole room went, oh, no, oh, that's him? You can tell. I'm sorry, y'all can tell that's him? He didn't even get a chance to greet me. They was like, oh. And I was like, oh, I can tell. I was like, oh, that's all right. He read it. He knows it's him. They didn't know it. So that I breathed. But literally, right? They couldn't breathe. The room couldn't breathe for 2 minutes because they were like, wait, so that means this whole story is real in some sort of way. I was like, yeah, there's some parts of him that are me, some parts of me that are him, but the story is real. And so what it did in the space was to open up a conversation, because the tagline of Jaded, hello, Black gay men. The tagline for Jaded was, what do you do when you're through with love, but love's not through with you? And I'm telling you, to have him walk in the room just kind of sitting and smiling, and have people go, well, wait a minute. So I don't have to surrender so ministry don't mean I have to be lonely. It's not God, it's not my gift of sacrifice back to the Lord. Praise the Lord, shame the devil. And so part of being able to invite him into the space was that I needed to bring into the room both my truth traps and my truth triggers. Hello? The idea that this person was not available to me, not accessible to me, what would he see in me? All of that in my truth traps and my truth triggers are well to be right there. I got to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. You know, let me tell y'all something about this. Really funny. I see your question, King Dre. When you take the oath, right? Somebody here that's brand new on the court of law, right? The law, the oath says, I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God, right? I'm not going to change a word. Hear this. I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Help me God. So help me God. So help me God. Because I'm scared. I'm going to try to fake it. I'm going to try to use some of my education to use really big words. I'm going to try to be distracted by it, you know, the title and other things, so that nobody will notice that there's something missing. But if you can tell the truth and the whole truth, walk in it. Be okay with what surrender is going to feel like. King Dre, Elder, when writing a book and those truth triggers arise, what is your suggestion? Repeated therapy, that you thought the triggers were resolved? So hear me, King Dre. When I talk about truth triggers, help, because what you're speaking of is my truth traps. Truth triggers are things that literally trigger the truth, right? And so if the repeated therapy that you need to help you because you thought these particular triggers were resolved. Oh, I don't need these resolved. I need these to be honored, because these are the thing that support you when you got to tell the truth, right? It's the friend that you say, read this, and they go, listen, now you know you fake it. No, that's for real. But what about the time? When I finished Jaded, because Sean was one of them, I took the manuscript of this book and took it to Kinko's and printed 12 copies, just bound, and sent them to people and said, tell me if this story rings true. And Minister Mickey Braden wrote me, Minister Mickey was, my minister of music, so she got hers on Thursday night at choir rehearsal. She came back to my apartment on Saturday, which was attached to the church, and handed me the manuscript. And I'm thinking, oh, she's telling me she doesn't have time to read. I open it, there's notes at the front, there's little things corrected in the middle, and then there's a sticker tab, and she said, this fight right here, this fight ain't finished. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean the fight ain't finished? Because there's a point where the lead character has gone to the second lead character's house to just kind of have a love moment, and he finds his ex there, who still had his key, and thought he was going to try to, shoot his shot again, because he wanted some big, tall country coon. You know what I'm saying? And so he's like, yeah, you get out, because you ain't never going to be the man that I was to him. And he's like, oh, he has that moment. Oh, my God, I'm heartbroken. I knew this was going to be really. He ran out and then ran into the ex with the dude he caught him cheating with, and they apologized. So he's standing, headed back home. And instead of going right like I had him the first time, I was like, oh, crap, what would happen if he went back in that house and fought for love, And, this is the Southeast of me talking, not parenthetically. Hello, somebody. But he went in and whooped somebody's ass for love. Hello? Because sometimes you got to be willing to whoop somebody's ass, not fight them in the name of Jesus if you're going to tell the truth. Right? And no, is this too much? I know it's Saturday. I know you want your elder.
Come on, Elder, you can be
I'm only
real.
playing. Y'all know how to do this.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
It's all good.
Because I'm telling you, in writing, what will happen is your truth triggers will take on other personalities so you can shut up.
I have a quick question for you.
Calvin, this ain't you. Mind your business. He gonna have sex with Devontae on the first date because that's how he get down. Mind your business and let him do his thing. Let him get past that so you can see who he really is instead of this side of judging him.
Thank you, Elder.
Elder, I have a quick question for you.
Yes, sir. Go right on.
So you made mention that you gave your manuscript to multiple people. Talk a little bit about how confident you was with that and how you selected those 6 people. So like some people who write, I know for me, I get a little afraid of sending my material to people.
So the only book I had written at the time was Unclutter, and I thought it was going to be the only one because I'm pastor, and so it's supposed to be kind of the tome I get to take around with me. And then these characters started talking, and it really was me talking to me while I was dealing with this process myself. And so after I wrote it, and I mean, for what happened for me, Sean, is that I would sit down at 10 o'clock and write till 6. And literally I would take lunch break. It was a job. It was a 10 to 6 job, right? And so I was so engrossed in it, having so many moments where it felt like I was exhausted from the process, that I wanted to be sure that it rang authentically. So what I ended up doing is, and I don't know why I didn't just think to, no, I do. I wondered why I didn't just take the manuscript and email it to all 12 of those people. So I picked 12 people. I called them my jaded jury. Because my first book's called Jaded. I like something you're already talking about. So I like jaded jury. And so I picked 6 men, 6 women. 6 of them were homosexual, 6 of them were heterosexual, because I just wanted to see if the story rang true as a novel. So they were, wait for it. So Minister Mickey, one of my closest friends, an actress friend in the congregation, one of the elder couples who, you know, because they were a couple, so and they were a lesbian couple. And I was like, this is gonna be a little, you know, lesbian-looking gay men and racy sometimes in our sexual conquest. I was like, so there's some parts of it, but I can't worry about it. If it's too much for them, it's gonna be too much for my mama. It's gonna be too much for some other woman who'll read. So I was like, read it. There was straight men. There was my first love from college, and I knew it had worked when the straight man called me and said, "Is it all right?" He said, "Is it all right that points in this book made my dick hard?" And I was like, not only is it all right, it's all right. Like, it literally means that I wrote something that made you see past the fact that I described him as tall and broad, and you knew you were looking at 2 men, somehow that you connected to it beyond it. And so, Sean, if I'm truthful, I picked 6 creative, artistic people and 6 readers. 6 people who had nothing invested except that they would do the work to read the book. Because, you know, we can, you know, gay men have written dissertations about Black is King. So I knew I was going to get some long, you know, winded and fully vested and engaged dissertations from a couple of friends. So, you know, I opened it and there were the 3 pages of notes, but they really were just corrections. I was like, they really, you know, I knew. So by the time I finished, I knew which one would be my editor because he had done that meticulous work. But then there were others who were just highlighting something, putting hearts and, you know, and so it was sitting with the 12 of those and really making sure I had brought all of the notes in. And of the 12, only one, and that was Minister Mickey's, was the "This fight is not finished." And that was probably the most problematic, the most, because for my brain and my process, the book was done. And so the idea of edits were take stuff out, they were correct stuff. It wasn't ever, because again, it's the first novel, I didn't have a place to even consider that. And so anybody old enough to remember Wayne's World, and they would talk about, you know, when they would have these dream sequences, they would go, literally, I sat down with her note and literally kind of meditated. And part Wayne's World, part Star Trek, Beam Me Up, Scotty. I found myself beamed and inserted inside Joshua on the street corner. And so it was weird because sometimes you dream and you see yourself, and sometimes you dream from your vantage point. Or maybe that's just me. And so to be in this moment in the vantage point, like, wait, I'm back on this corner. Wait, what's happening? And this was probably one of the weirdest things that happened for me. I was conscious that Kevin was back there in order to continue the story. Then I remember being pulled out of it so that it was Joshua's story. Right? And so I got to get back into the character and take him back into the apartment. And so then I became kind of this, you know, this energy off to the side that was watching and writing, you know what I mean? Watching and writing. And that's what the process was like for me. I let the characters be so fully realized that they would talk to me. So there were some lines, some conversations that were literally, I felt like I was transcribing them.
So, Elder, there's a question from our Facebook. One question is, how do you organize the dialogue between the characters?
So that's a good, and thank you for that. So for me, that proved to be a 2-part process. One is don't organize it. Let the conversation flow. Just the lines, and you just write the conversation out. And then the second became the process of opening up the conversation. This line, space this line, space this line, receive that. So it's just, and then the third becomes the thing that is the writer's thing, and that is that, you know, Sean offered, Missy replied, Carla screamed, you know what I mean? That's where you know, if you've got a long dialogue, you know, you can take the break in there and say, Carla huffed, and then continue. You know what I mean? It's the things that remind you to remind the reader of who's speaking. So you can't just have it be line to line to line to line, especially if it's a couple in a fight or something. There's got to be some insertion in there that reminds people of who is speaking. And that's, again, where you keep your secret weapons. Somebody say secret weapons. You keep your secret weapons of a bunch of those words. Your thesaurus will be exceptional when you're writing, because unless you're one of those people that can always think of, so and so said, offered, get, replied, da da da, all of those words that stay in conversation. You know what I mean? There's literally 117 of them. So there are a lot, and in colloquial, regular conversation, you're probably only going to use a dozen. So you find the ones that feel most like you. Somebody when if I write, because people know me, so and so offered, that for somebody else it's going to ring inauthentic. You know what I mean? So just say Mimi said.
Let me jump in here real quick. Thank you, Elder.
That other one about.
But real quick, I just want everyone to know that's on this Zoom call that we are streaming live on Facebook. So if you have some concerns about your picture being this, and we should have announced this in the beginning, so the Game Changers do apologize. Feel free to go ahead and put a thumbnail up or some other picture or whatever. I just want to make sure people are aware that we are streaming to the Game Changer Facebook page. Okay, thank you.
And the second part of your question, Carla, is how did you select scenery? So for me, that proves to be the exciting part of writing for me, because I'm a writer, but I'm also a researcher. So like Sean, you talked about Meet the Hendersons, and I'm telling you, I don't think I've ever been as proud or cried as instantly as getting up on Instagram one day and seeing a picture of Meet the Hendersons and Your Breakfast, and like reading it. And I was like, somebody got up to read my book today, and I was like, I get that it's my friend. He was on it's the thing I always wanted. He was on vacation. I could just see the whole curl up, and it blessed my heart. And I want to use that one as an example, Sean, because Meet the Hendersons and telling the story. So Meet the Henderson tells the story of two men who are together for 46 years, and we meet them on the day that one may be losing the other. The freaky part is 3 weeks after I was literally waiting for Meet the Henderson to arrive from the printer, and this story dropped on the New York Times about a Black gay male couple who were together 46 years and they met in the Army. And I was like, wait, what? And people were like, is this their story? I was like, my book been finished and it'll be out next week. This story just dropped. But what was beautiful about it for me, and this is answering the scenery question, is that it gave me the opportunity to give two Black gay men a history, right? And so I thought, where will they be from? One was from Toledo, Ohio. Let's go to Ohio. Let's go to Toledo. And then doing the actual research. So people, when you talk about selecting the scenery, make it a place you've always wanted to visit, and then go visit it. Do your research to Google the town, and then search the streets, and then search the neighborhoods, because it then gives the story authenticity. In the sequel to Jaded, one of the characters was from Bridgeport, Connecticut. So I had to go in there and literally find street names and literally find sections where Black affluent families would have grown up, so that I could tell this guy's backstory. And doing the story for Because He Lives, one of them I've made from Tulsa, Oklahoma, because I wanted to be able to write about Black Wall Street. I wanted to be able to talk about this young social activist Black gay man who grew up in a town where kind of the capacity to be strong, bold, and who he was as a Black man came from some sort of history, And I didn't want to do Selma, Alabama, because I felt like it would be weighted and there would still be enough Southern weight on it to stop him from being free. So I thought, where would he be Black and revolutionary, but not so much? So it took me to Tulsa, Oklahoma. So there was a lot of research to be able to unpack. And then the other character was from Charlotte, North Carolina. I know Charlotte, North Carolina well, and so it gave me the capacity to build, to build in these additional characters, right? So there's Mark, there's Jacob, and Because He Lived, but there's also Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Charlotte, North Carolina. So the scenery gives you the opportunity as a writer to expand the thing you're writing about, right? So a lot of times we can be, for a period, y'all remember all of the Black gay novels were set in New York, all of them, just because everybody wanted the wild and free capacity to write the big story of the big neighborhood and the big guy. And and I was like, I'm from DC. That doesn't hold that for me. So I wanted to be able to richly travel to other places, because, I know one of the things that connected Rev Rob and I was that Sean and I both lived lives where we were traveling. We know what it feels like to have to travel on a Friday, be back Saturday night to be in the pulpit on Sunday. And so for most people, those stories became, hey, would you bring me? Or tell me about your trip. When Sean and I got on the phone, he would say, how are you? Because he knew I'd flown to LA, done a shoot and flown right back. He'd say, how are you? Why you answer the phone? I was like, I saw it was you. Yeah, you should take a bath and get in bed. Okay. Because all he was concerned about was my physical body. And so if I'm writing that character, the two characters, like the two us's, I'm going to be so much more concerned about the world that's around us and the blur that it is than, hey, I was in I was in Hong Kong for 3 days and look at all the stuff I saw, right? If the character is a busy businessman like Sean, he's not going to see it. But I want the reader to see it and know what he's missing so that it gives you this almost empathy for the life that he's living. So when something happens over here, you get it from a very real place. Got it? And so that's, I wanted to talk about secret weapons, and that's one of mine, is to purposely place characters in locations where I am not, so that I get to write more than just the character studies. I have one of the books that I wrote. Right here, this novel is called Because He Lives. And I named it that not just because you had one character who was dealing with the fact that he had been hiding or unaware, not even hiding, unaware of his sexuality and not dealing with it because he had to deal with other family dynamic stuff. And so, and then he meets this guy and then something tears them apart. And so I dealt with Because He Lives as the idea that he could no longer avoid his truth because his truth was a living thing. He lives, right? But it also allowed, wait for it, church folk, it also allowed Because He Lives, the song, to be a separate entity and energy in the novel, right? So it comes up a few times and in different ways and in different places. And each time, I've loved how each time somebody was able to write me and say that the song blindsided them. They thought once you done it, that it didn't have any more capacity to be revisited. I didn't think, I figured you were finished with it at that thing where you did that. And so when it showed up the next time, I was knocked out. I was like, so was I. That's the whole point of it, that it had historical and family connection to it, that was personal, right? And so be clear that things will get personal when you're writing. They will get personal. If you're telling the truth, they will get personal. That your best friend, your mama, your ex your present will be able to see, I knew you were going to use that moment. I remember that fight. We almost didn't make it through that fight.
Quick question for you, Elder.
And I see ministers. Go ahead,
Go ahead, Minister. You got a question? Sorry, go ahead.
I see. So when you're writing, how much time should you spend a day writing? Honestly, Minister, it really depends on how much you have. Sometimes you have a day in the week. Sometimes depending on your schedule, you have time all day. I set the clock to set the intention. But again, I'm a Virgo. I like structure. So when I got up and didn't have anything else to do as a pastor, I was like, okay, get up, get your bell off to school, leave, shower, and then leave this room and go into the office. For me, that was also the thing too, not letting every place be my place to write. That I picked a place so that it's intentional and assigned. And if I write for 5 hours, I write for 5 hours. But if you write for an hour, but in that hour you were like, God, then stop. Right? Don't do it just like I'm supposed to write 5 hours every day. Because sometimes a moment will happen, a chapter will happen, a character dialogue will happen, and it will kick you in your soul. When it say, get up. And if it never says sit back down again that day, don't go for a walk and clear your hair, because I'm telling you, when you write truthfully, your truth triggers are open, you better go outside and get some air. You better call your friend and be like, what are you doing? You better take yourself to the movies and go see that comedy, because you just have to give yourself permission to release when your truth triggers, right? Not your truth traps. Your truth triggers when you feel like open and vulnerable. I'm like, whoo, dang, I can't believe I wrote that. And I'm not sure it's going, how people post stuff all the time and then say, I might delete that. It's that. You're like, I got it out. Ooh, now let me walk away from it and see if I'm going to let it live. Go ahead, Sean, and because I see Ashton has a.
So for me, I have a quick question. I have a tendency to be very visual.
Mm-hmm.
So when I want to write the story, I want to have Post-its, and I want to put them on the walls, and I want to connect them. So, and then I get stuck. So I hear you saying, hey, spend some time writing. how do I apply what my process looks like visually onto something to create the book?
So that's such a good question. And so here's what I would suggest, because you don't get stuck, you get distracted.
Okay.
So the characters in your head then literally have a visual place to be transported. So you start living the story outside of yourself instead of through yourself. So pick a, do a YouTube or pick an image that's in the place that you want to write about that day, and that day make it your screensaver. So when you go to the bathroom and come back, there it is. You kind of go, but then you open this file that takes you right back to where you're writing, because you're right. Because sometimes I always swore that music would help me in the process of writing novels. Music helps when I'm writing uncluttered. Get off your ass and do something. When I'm writing, it's time for some action. Music distracts when I'm trying to write a novel, because I'm trying to give my characters my soundtrack. And Joshua was tight and business oriented, and he's not going to be listening to Natalie Cole holler potty lights in the middle of the afternoon, right? He might listen to some Chopin, he might listen to some Anita Baker. And so I literally started to redefine the soundtrack based on the character. So what I would do is play one of their favorite songs before I started writing. I was like, yeah, it feels like it's going to be a Joshua kind of morning. So I would play something that he would be into, and then be like, okay, what a difference a day made, and the difference is you. Okay, some Ella, got it, and let's go. Right? And so when you can be mindful that you are the vessel and not the vehicle, you'll get out of your own way.
Thank you.
Yes, I see a hand raised. So let me grab these two real quick. So because it can be personal, do you first speak to those who may be in the writing beforehand? It really depends, Ashley. You say, do I first speak to those who may be in the writing before? It really it may be so. Sometimes, I do take that cleansing. Listen, I'm not sitting anywhere without my holy water and a candle. And so I might take a minute to see, where I go back in or who's taking me back in, right? Because I have gotten up with the characters going on, like, let's go get to the computer. I got something to tell you. And so it really, again, being the vehicle, being the vessel, but not the vehicle. I let myself be there, but let the character drive. And so sometimes, again, like the moment that Rev Rob was just talking about, that image that reminds me what town I'm in, that image that reminds me, sometimes I have created the visual for the character, and then I have to do the work to let them be visceral. Like I literally have to see them, and sometimes have done a casting, right? To just be like, this is Joshua, this is Elijah, this is what they look like. Sometimes they are faceless, and sometimes they're only a face. It really depends on how personal it is. Yes, sometimes you have to see them and see them, and feel them and feel them. And so I speak to them beforehand every day in this kind of prayer process. Use me as the vessel to tell your story, and let's go in. And sometimes it's a business thing, sometimes it's a work thing, and so or the ambiance of where the singer character is preparing for rehearsal, and so I see the surrounding before I get into the story. And remember that, remember as a writer, your assignment is in fact to transport your reader so that you don't, so the question that was asked about how do you select scenery, don't be so quick to be a talker that you forget to be a visualizer, right? Let me see the street they're walking on. Let me see the apartment they live in. Let me see the neighborhood they live in. Let me see where they work so that they have rich layers to them. And so that you remember that people visualize, right? And so part of that helps with the character study. If you're in the office, Joshua's in the office for me. If you're in the studio, Elijah's in the studio for me. So I remind myself by my location where I am. And then I have to remember where I am, okay? It's not just a room when you talk studio. There's a green room, there's the booth, just the thing, just remember what you're doing. And it will remind you who's speaking, will remind you to be authentic to the voice of the person you're speaking to. You should never be able, you should always be able to pick up a book, I feel, and insert yourself into the story and know based on which character, who the characters are, you know who's speaking. If that makes any sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You should be able to know who's speaking. Let me see. Rev Ken, good morning. Is there a writing software that you use or would recommend? People, listen, I'm 55. the only writing software I got is, is to run it through spell check and grammar check in Microsoft, because part of the things that people have gotten these days are these things that help them do that. And for me, those can also be distractions, because listen, for those of us from cultures from around the world, there's nothing like trying to write in one of those softwares and it keeps telling you that EXECKS is not a word, and you get a red line on it every time. It's like, I told you his name was this. This, and every time afterward, recognize it. Stop trying to tell me that Leandria is too black with the quave under it. My character's name are Leandria and Deshawn. Stop this. And so anytime, those cultural things just start to become a bother to tell me, that this can't be a sentence. And, I have, anybody that knows me knows that, I can be a language Nazi, and so there are times when a character speaks a certain way and they have to be allowed to speak, period. And I used to think, when I was, before writing like novel stuff, when I was writing, I used to think through my own cranium all the time, right? And I think you were there, Sean. I think anybody would. We did a Kwanzaa thing one year when we were at Interlight in DC, and I was given purpose, Nia, purpose. And what came to me as my presentation was this piece on this about this slave gathering in the backwoods with all of these people and the Sia woman, right? And the Sia woman is telling these stories, and he's telling them like he's retelling them. And he said her name was Sophronia, and she came and she told one woman she was gonna give birth to a boy child, who was gonna give birth to a girl child, who was gonna give birth to a boy child, and she was gonna give birth to a girl child who was gonna stay on the bus and change the way our folk got our rights. And that girl ran back to the Parks plantation and cried all night long. People were like, oh Jesus, and so it was just kind of that way to insert history through this kind of 5 places back narrative. And it was so uncomfortable, but it kept saying, stay with it. Because listen, it's because it was speaking like that. He told her she was a girl child who was going to give birth to a boy child, who was going to give birth to a girl child. And she ran back to the Jackson plantation and she sang all night long. And then that girl was Mahaya. And it just came to, and the last piece I did, I said, girl child, boy child, boy child, girl child, was going to give to a girl child, was going to give birth to a boy child, and that boy child was going to start a church, and that church was going to let us know that God would love and love for everybody. Cleophas ran back that day crying because he ain't know. And Bishop Cheeks burst into tears, and I was like, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? And literally, people had to get up to console him, and I'm thinking, what have I done wrong? What is happening? What is happening? And when they kind of opened up to space, and he looked at me, he said, how could you know that? And I was like, what? So the slave that I referenced on the Cheeks plantation was named Cleophas. And Cleophas was his grandfather's name. And I was like, okay. And so you just have to allow yourself to do your process, because trying to write that in any kind of format in anything was causing all kinds of triggers to the system. The sentence was structured wrong, words had to be spelled wrong, the language had to be alliterated wrong. And so it just became this thing that I had to suspend everything that was trying to help me in order to be the most authentic, right? And I say that to say that, that the opposite of that can be being mindful of if there's any things that you've ever done in sermons and in conversation, in any way that people say that's your thing. My best friend yesterday, I wrote something. He said, Lord, you love you some alliteration, and I do, right? So I be very careful to hold on to the things that are your writing style and play with them, so that you can, so that you can put your icing on every cake you make, and people remember stylistically that this is you. You know what I mean? While you're speaking for other people, those bridges in between those conversations are the things that help people, that help the people remind you that you do purpose, power, the point, and that you do, elevate, assassinate, you do that you do this thing that makes people go, ooh, yeah, sometimes you're a rapper, ain't you? It's like, nope, I love alliteration. Sometimes all the words in a sentence start with J, sometimes they all end with 8. It's just that thing that has people go, ooh, this moment right here, this moment right here. There's a thing that can sometimes, because I always say, be mindful, write these two down. For me, it's alliteration and reiteration, right? And reiteration is just that thing that sometimes will make you put brown paper up on the walls and make sure that you remember, bring that back, or highlight it to bring it back. But sometimes if you're just in the flow of it, it will come back. It's not a thing that always has to, that will ever, quite frankly, that has to bleed through the whole story. But sometimes in a section, there's a section in Because He Lives where two characters keep missing each other. And the dance was, he turned to the left to board the elevator, ascending to the, and had he turned to the right, you know, and it was, had he turned to the left, had he turned to the right, he moved to the left, had he turned to the right, he turned to the right, he bent down, had he stood up. And so it literally, the reiteration was the had he. It wasn't left, right, it wasn't up, down, it was had he, you know, that, and that was the thing that, you know, that made literally, one of my friends flew into town to have dinner and have a conversation about a book. And I was like, who does that? But he was like, you know, that he's like, that had he just messed me up. And it literally made me throw the book, because you just find the thing. And if it does something to you, it's going to do something to somebody else. If it does something to you, it's going to do something to somebody else. So take your brave stuff out of the way. Take your, you know, I don't normally cry, all of that stuff that you use to be your, you know, defense mechanisms. They got to move out of the way, because you're the vessel, you're not the vehicle. You're the vessel.
Elder, we are coming to a timing.
Yes, sir. I see too well.
Yeah, so I know we got one more question, but after that question, can you then walk us through the publication process and the how do you edit the book? So edit, package, and then the process of finding the person to to produce the book, or and then.
Let me answer this question real quick. When do you know a work is done and it's time to let it be? Right. Revelette, you don't know until you know. Honestly, you don't. For me, you know, because we can be folk of good resolve. Well, look, you don't know till you know, because sometimes I've gone to the beginning of a book believing I knew the end of it and didn't. Sometimes it's the steps to it, just as it is ending, where you think there's some sense of resolve and something else cracks open at the last minute. So you really don't know until you know. You don't know until you have a moment where the characters breathe and go, yeah, that's it. You know, for me, Jaded was probably the only book that had its own kind of mindful happily ever after, because it was an epilogue. You know, there was a wedding. So it was like, okay, there it is. But even how the wedding ended, how the whole thing ended, still didn't, you know, I was in the party and something happened and another thing happened. And I was like, yeah, just back out the room. You know what I mean? And so that's what it was. It wasn't the end, it was the back out of the room that let me know the story was finished. And do you ever let people read unfinished stories? Like the beginning of such, if you trust those people, please let them read it, because that is a thing that'll help you breathe stylistically. And y'all see me smiling because Reverend Sean is ending this conversation with the way I told y'all not to begin it. How do I publish? How do I edit? Where do I get it? Da, 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 da. So two things, game changers. I want y'all to be aware that one of the things that UFCM's communications department is working with Envision is LifeWorks, Life Publications, Life on Stage, Life Films, so that we become the vehicle to get that done. It becomes a portal, because by next convocation, I want all the 3 members of the House of Bishops that were on for the town hall meeting, I want them each and all to have their meeting on, period. And if I got to travel to each city to help, I'm already the portal, send it in. I've already had a how do I get started conversation with one of them, because that's what that's what we should be able to do with all this creative energy. And as Rev Sean started, so if you're trying to figure out how to get stuff printed, how to get stuff edited, how to get stuff done, and you didn't know I had 8 books out, then you ain't really trying to get nothing printed, not trying to get nothing edited. You ain't trying to get nothing out, because it's a simple, Pastor Elder, how'd you get your book out? Here, here's the printer. Call him, da-da-da. Here's how much it costs. Da-da-da. You need an editor? Here's talk to Amanda. Here, Lynn. You know, oh, wait, you're in Charlotte. I got 2 friends that edit right there. You're in no danger of needing to know any of this. If I say, oh, let me get on the phone. Oh, no, I'm not finished yet. Then why you calling me? Because I want to know how to do it. Because I'm going to tell you, Sean, the reason I'm always mindful of that is because people can get stuck I'm a now what kind of dude, right? And people can get stuck in the then what. I finished the book and then what? Then I got to find someone to print it and then what? I got to find a cup and then what? I got to find it. You know what I mean? And we get lost, just like in the posters, we get lost in the then what, and then don't get to get the power and the impact of the now what. I'm finished. Now what? Oh, good. Let me call my friend so and so and so and so. You got it? Well, let's save it as a PDF. So that we'll save it as a PDF. Send it to me. Got it? But don't you need it to correct it? No, because I'm gonna print this one out, mark it up so that you can correct it. If I'm, I don't want to steal your voice. I just want you. Have we done a grammatical check? Have you done that? Have you? Because it's that kind of stuff that is sometimes, other eyes. Somebody asks you, let somebody read stuff. Sometimes it's the other eyes that make you realize that you inadvertently switched to ancillary characters because they were both in the room. And I was like, no, you said that Jan said that. But Jan said this. She couldn't have said, oh, that's Gail. Why did I say that? Because you almost let them be superfluous people and we needed something else. That's not for your eyes to realize because you're the writer. You're not going to catch a thing like that. It's a little glitch in the matrix that somebody else catches because you let them into your brain. Well, that's what I want. I want the communications team, Rev, to be that component. People that we know. I've got a team of editors and folks who can do that stuff. And if we're doing it in-house and for ourselves, it is the portal of good. Now, y'all just get to write, because the writer gets to write. The writer shouldn't have to be concerned about publishing. The writer shouldn't be concerned about stuff that will only kick up the writing process, right? Let's talk, let's engage, let's get you a deadline. Let's talk then on the deadline to see if you're finished. If not, where can I help? Because if you're thinking about the other three things you asked me about, you're thinking you're disappointing me or you're missing a deadline, which then starts to screw up the whole writing process in the first place. But if it's a thing that gets to be, because Amazon now has Create Space. And, this, my friend Garen Jones, who was one of my Now What guests, printed this on Create Space. I placed the order on the 17th of February. The book was printed on the 19th. So that's what they do. They literally print on demand. And so there are all sorts of ways to get it done so that you don't have, shelves full of books at a time. But the other thing is, if you are the independent writer and you go, let me tell y'all something. They can tell you this in Baltimore and DC and Philly. We have small churches. And so when, as a pastor, I go, to preach at one of our churches, there have been many times when they say, Pastor, we only have blank to give you as honorarium. That's well and good. Can I also sell books? So I have left the church with 4 times what the honorarium was because I sold books. And you can't do that if you do this print on demand, because then you have to buy all the books first. Me, I print my own books, print them at $3, $4 a book, sell them at $10 a book, and walk away with triple profits, right? Because the other thing is, if I print and I'm also able to keep my books at a reasonable price, and people go, how much your books? $10. Oh, good. Somebody will hand me a 20. I don't think in 15 years I've ever given back change. And then we got the Cash App and the swipe, because people be like, oh, I don't have any money. I take cards. Oh, switch, man. Yeah. And I'm thinking, oh, I did good. I did good. I got $400 in my pocket. Then I go to my Cash App and there's another $1,000 sitting there because I forgot about all the swiping. So there's all sorts of mechanisms in play. And then maybe at a future workshop, we can talk about that. Now the story is done, right? But this one's write this down and getting that process done so that we can have this group say, hey, 2 of us have something finished. How do we get it published? How do we get it printed, right? And so hear this real quick, y'all. Published and printed are the same thing. Published is just a portal through which you print. Simon & Schuster is a portal that prints the book so it can be sold. That's what meant to say publish it. So if you print it and get it done yourself, you're the publisher.
Got you.
I'm not just a member, I'm the player president.
Thank you so much, Elder. This has been fruitful.
I'm glad. Thank you, Game Changers. Thank you for bringing this kind of rich fire to this movement. I always tell vote. I'm the original Game Changer. And got my behind handed to me a number of times in Unity for the ways I showed up. But all of those robes are still in my closet. And all that fire is still in my mouth.
Amen. Amen. Well, everybody, I hope that you were able to take away a lot of this good stuff that our amazing elder pastor of the pastor of Unity Fellowship Church, Newark.
Newark?
So we really appreciate you, Pastor. We want to have you back. I think the Game Changers are going to try to host something maybe monthly, and we're going to just go around and use the resources that we have in our movement. So we definitely would love for you to come back and reiterate some of this stuff, as well as talk about the next steps. I hope everyone on the call or everyone on Facebook, there's 15 people on Facebook, there were up to 18 people. So we had a great crowd. This is our first time doing this. And again, Elder, thank you for stepping up and being willing to just go, oh, absolutely, I'll do that, to make sure that we have what we need and tools in order to be great. Thank you so much.
And I'll see you all in your next workshop, because y'all got energy that I need. And let somebody make a commitment to each other now. I'm gonna get off so y'all can talk without me. Somebody make a commitment to reading next time. Huh?
Okay, that's fair.
Somebody's closer than they acknowledge right now, and it's freaking somebody out that it might be easier to get, that you might be published before the year's out. Yeah.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen.
Let's go.
Lights, camera, and action. We'll be right back here at 12:30. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.